Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay.
I'm going to be here. Yeah. Well, it's actually live right now. No, it's not the greatest.
When we were there, they were like, "Oh, icebergs are gone." I'm like, "What's that?" That's not an iceberg. Because somebody was not used to it.
I'm going to block the view, so. Hi, Keith. Yes, fine. Nice to meet you. Hi, Keith. Hey, good. Good to see you. Good. Thanks for coming. Oh, you got this.
You won't be able to see the screen?
I guess not. I'll have to
Can you
move.
just get right in the middle?
I can, yeah.
Probably the best way. At least we'll have some sense of what the screen looks like.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
No, could be okay.
Okay.
All right. Hey folks, we're going to get going in a few minutes, so if you would like to make sure you get a seat, there are more chairs in the back room over there, so come and make yourself comfortable and we'll see if we need to pull up some more chairs. Looking like we're going to need more chairs.
I'm all right. Yeah, it's been too long. I'm here to film this with all the camera gear, and there's no network and I can't.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's what we have to do with my phone.
No network?
Well, there's internet, but there's no network. Yeah. So I have to bring my own router next time.
Are you building a new house or what's that behemoth going up?
It's somebody else. Yeah.
It's not yours.
No.
Okay.
Well, so will I?
Well,
Hello, everyone. There's probably a bit more room for chairs over in the front here if you want to get a chair. Get yourself set up over here on the sides. Good view to the screen.
Am I blocking anybody?
Go standing back, check. Hello. How's that sound back there? Okay, sounds okay? Not too bad. We could set the microphone up. Hang on. Does that sound any better? Any different? Is that all okay? Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, we're just going to start with our land acknowledgement, and we're going to ask our board member, 𝐸𝐻𝑒𝑟𝑒, to do that for us before we get going, we get going with Gilbert.
We pay respect to the Anishinaabe people who are the traditional guardians of this land. We acknowledge their long-standing sacred relationship with this territory, which is unceded. The ancestral territory along the 𝐸𝐸𝐻𝑒𝐳𝑐, or Gatineau River, has served as a travel route, location for villagers, site of meetings and exchanges amongst visiting nations. We acknowledge the traditional knowledge keepers and the courageous leaders, past, present, future. We pledge to honor and respect the Anishinaabe Nation.
𝐸𝐻𝐈𝐾𝐻, Gilbert, Whiteduck, and 𝐸𝐻𝐞𝐳𝐫𝐵 𝐸𝐻𝐻𝐿 So my name is Gilbert Whiteduck. I'm with the Gatineau Valley Historical Society, which I'm very proud to be a member of, and to be working with a fabulous group of people. Thank you for coming out this evening to hear a presentation about the Opwàgan Falls, or what we call Opwàgan. Opwàgan is what we, in the Algonquin language, and for us, the meaning for us means the pipe, a sacred pipe. And there's a whole story behind that I won't take the time, but I did want to say a couple of things. First of all, speak very briefly about the Gatineau Valley Historical Society. If you're not a member, this is the time to become a member. It's very important because it allows for a lot of speaker series for things to happen, and it's your participation and your signing up as a member that makes a difference. You know, and as we all know, your history, like Indigenous history of this territory, is very, very important. Many of you are from this territory, or your families are, you're connected. For us, it's more that we have been here for thousands of years. And when we speak about the Gatineau River, I was speaking to someone, for us it's not only a river. Water is sacred, water is alive. Our teachings tell us all of that. And that's why, you know, I've been putting forward the idea, and I hope you'll hear more about it and will support it, that eventually that the Gatineau River receive, if you haven't heard about it, something called personhood, which would mean a lot more careful protection of the river, ensuring that development be carefully done. Doesn't mean no development, that it be done. I do want to mention that Donnie, who's been a long-time friend from way back in college, 50 years ago we were in college together, actually live together on top of that, which is very interesting. Could tell you stories, a lot of stories. And Mark this evening, and I know the presentation, I was looking at some of the photos, and they're just wonderful, and came across some information about some Algonquin Anishinaabe that lived along this area, so that was very, very interesting. But as I look along the river, I don't know if it is for you. The Opwàgan Falls is but one thing. I know when I'm driving back home often, in my memory, in my mind, I'm thinking of my ancestors who were canoeing up that river or canoeing down. It just flashes in my mind how important that river was. And as somebody mentioned, how difficult it would have been to portage at different places. But they did it many, many times. And how important it was. We often forget how important water is. Water is life. But we're still ready to empty sewer lines, to build houses, to put... So collectively, I'll say to protect the water, you know, the damming of the river made a damn thing, you know, in a way, but it was part of progress. So I think the story we'll be hearing tonight is seeing how all of that developed. And I must mention very clearly, it was done without the involvement of the Anishinaabe, the Algonquin people. We were never asked or told. It was imposed on us. And that's why I hope in these kind of presentations, and there'll be other kinds, that we can come together. Because it's only coming together to protect the land, to protect the water, to better understand each other. You know that, because your kids, my grandkids and whatnot are going to continue living here. How do we ensure that nature and all of this is protected? It's only by working together and knowing each other. So I invite Donnie and Mark to come forward to do their wonderful presentation. And I hope we have a lot of questions for them after. I hope, because I have a few. So thank you, miigwech.
Thank you so much, Gilbert, for getting us going on this. So I'll just start briefly introduce myself. I'm Marc Cockburn. I'm the Gatineau Valley Historical Society Archivist and the recent past president. I was president for about 14 years of the Historical Society. And during that time, I had a wonderful opportunity to work with some really great people, including people like Don, and to collaborate and have a wonderful team behind us. My background, actually, I worked at the Library and Archives for about 32 years in the map section there. So actually, I'm actually a geographer at heart. So this is why I find this topic quite interesting, because we're talking about landscapes and historical landscapes in particular. So I'm just going to turn it over to Don. He'll introduce himself, and then we'll just we'll get into our presentation.
Thanks, Mark. As Mark said, I'm Donnie Kealey, and I grew up right across the field from this hall. And my parents and ancestors all grew up in the Gatineau area here in and around Low. I'm a retired teacher for a few years, and I got interested in some history when the 150th anniversary of Low come up, and I created a book on the municipality of Low. And ever since then, with the discovery of what I found in that book, has led me to find more and more information, and it's always my hope to be able to share it with people in the area and in the Gatineau. So, thank you.
So Don and I are going to have to share a microphone back and forth a bit, so bear with us as we do that. The title of this talk is "A River Runs Beneath Us," and that's a phrase that I kind of coined, or from Brian Doyle's books, or his contributions. For instance, Marianne Alice and Up to Gatineau are books that really kind of inspired us and inspired myself, especially to try and learn more about the Opwàgan Dam. You know, we think about the Gatineau River now as a recreational paradise. I mean, we've all been canoeing and boating and fishing on it, and it's also important for hydroelectric development. It helps run our air conditioners, I guess. But before that, you know, it's the river beneath. It's the farmers and the people who lived and worked along there, the transportation, and you know, the landscape. You know, the rapids and the floodplains that we're going to see a bit tonight too, that sort of typified the geography there. And even before that, as Gilbert alluded to as well, for over 10,000 years, since time immemorial, it was a vital resource for our... Can't hear okay? Is that a problem? Okay. Okay, I'll try. Is that better if I speak a little bit closer? Yeah. This microphone's not so hot. I gotcha. Okay, that's better. Okay. So for over 10,000 years, of course, since time immemorial, the local indigenous people have been using the Gatineau River. And we're going to get into a bit to that tonight and show a couple pictures, but that's definitely a theme I think we want to explore a little further on. So we're going to talk first about the sources of the book. This is Don's going to tell us a bit about the two 𝐸𝐴𝐺𝐻 Falls albums that we're going to be drawing from here tonight.
Thanks. So in doing my book for the 150th anniversary, I came across from, by coincidence, a picture of Charles Lowe, who was a lumberman in the, after what Lowe was named after. And it was through the McCord Museum, which is in Montreal. The McCord Museum is an establishment that houses a lot of pictures and artifacts from across Canada. And I contacted the librarian there and I said, where can I get a hold of that picture? And she said, oh, I can give you a copy of it, but does it have anything to do with 𝐸𝐴𝐺𝐻 Falls? And I said, yes. She said, well, I found an album here, a file here, and it has 2 albums in it. And so my wife and I, Mary Sue, went down to the McCord Museum, and we had an iPod and a Canon camera. They took the file out, put it on the table, and we spent near a day taking pictures of pictures. And I discovered these pictures. I hadn't seen it in all the research I had done, and there were pictures of what's called the Pine Grove area, which is right across from the Opwàgan Dam. And it was an area where a lot of campers had went and had been there. And the album seemed to originate from them because they had all kinds of pictures about, oh, thank you. They had all kinds of pictures of camping, but they also had pictures of the falls and pictures I hadn't seen before, close-ups. People had gotten right into the falls, right around the falls and surrounding it. And then we noticed that there were pictures of the river, which went from the Opwàgan right through the Casabazza Bridge. And each picture showed the river, and to remember that these pictures were all pre-dam pictures from about 1917 to 1925. It showed each rapid, each falls, all the way to Casabazza. And for each picture, there was a script involved to explain each picture. So these were a real treasure to be able to handle. So there were 114 pictures of the river before the dam was taken, and there were about 44 pictures of what's called the Pine Grove, and close-up pictures also of what took place at the 𝐸𝐺𝐻 Falls. So I had wanted to return when I got home to go back and take pictures with better lighting and that. But in the meantime, there was a turnover in the librarian there, and they refused me, and I couldn't do that. So we had to live with what we had for now. So that's some information about these albums. One was actually labeled as being camping at Lowe, and as you can see, they were pretty crude campers. They were around 1917. They came up and they were in tents, and they played around the river in front of the falls, and they also went over to explore the 𝐸𝐺𝐻 Falls, and they were pretty brave. They went right over and got right in near the log jams, and that's the importance of those pictures, that is that it shows the falls what it could be like. Pretty rough place. Mark, do you want to do an overview of the Gatineau River, new and old?
So just to mention, we're using we're using what we call reference copies of the photographs that Don took at the McCord Museum, and I actually went back myself one time too and did a whole bunch of photographs as well. So between the two of us, we got sort of decent photographs, and those are the ones we're going to use tonight. We did get permission from McCord to be able to present them, but if we did want to get them all digitized, the whole albums, we got an estimate done, it would be $4,000. So that's why we're using cheaper reference copies at this point, but we're also hoping that someday we'll find some funding to be able to digitize those. Also, another source that we're using as well, back in 2019, I went to Hydro-Quebec Archives and got into the Gatineau Power Company files. And I copied about 100 pages of files from their earlier land acquisition files. So those are the files that went from like 1917 to 1927, which details all of the settlements and the lots and concessions and a lot of the title information that went with a lot of those, with all those purchases. So I'll show you a bit more of those a bit later on as we get into the talk. Also, another source that we're using tonight are air photos from the National Air Photo Library down on Bow Street. We're lucky, actually, that this is all documented in the Up to Gatineau from Duncan Marshall. That in 1927, the National Air Photo program was just taking off, really. It was after the First World War, and they were developing those technologies. And they were based actually at Rockcliffe Park down in Ottawa. And it just so happened that they used Gatineau as their test site. And so we have a lot of those photos going back to 1927. And they're actually some of the earliest air photos anywhere in Canada. And actually, like I said, those are the various flight lines that we got to explore. So hopefully I'll show you some of those a little bit later in the presentation. Some of the other sources we used are, of course, Library and Archives Canada, where I used to work, and of course I had a chance to get in some files there and make some copies of some of the information they have there. We also used the Gatineau Valley Historical Society image bank. There are some images out of our own collection, and of course from Don's book, Low Municipality, Reflections of the Past. And of course, viewers like you. One thing Don and I wanted to say is that we're not the experts on everything that happened in that little era. I mean, we're just taking a glimpse of it a bit tonight too, but we know in this room there's probably people here collectively that know way more than we do. And there's some family connections and family photos and family stories that we would love to tap into someday. So we'll give you our contact information at the end, particularly Dawn. So if there's anything you would like to contribute that we could use maybe as we explore this a bit further on in the future, that would be great. Okay. End of slideshow. So at this point, we're going to switch over into Google Earth. And for the rest of this talk, we're going to do it out of Google Earth. I've done these before, and just bear with us. Hopefully this will work okay, and we won't have too many technical glitches. This gives us an opportunity to be able to sort of do a fly-through and use those aerial photographs of overlays, and sort of put those images that we're going to look at into context, into a bit of a geographical context, do a spatial context. Am I sounding okay back there? No. Up? No? Should I be up? Okay, sorry. Okay, so we're going to start, I just wanted to start first with giving everybody a bit of an overview, a little geographical overview of where we are situated. So here we are here in Low, at nice St. Michael's High School, and here is the Gatineau River. The Gatineau River, at least north of here anyway, all the way up to almost Lac Ste. Marie, Heaney Lake. You might have seen over on the side there that Don brought in this old map. This is out of the Gatineau Power Company files as well. Or actually, I guess it was with the Howarth. Can't remember. I guess it was in the Howarth albums. But it's actually one of the early maps of the Gatineau before it was flooded, and it gives you a bit of an idea of the names of the locations and some of the rapids that were here at the time. So what I did is I took that and I superimposed it onto Google Earth. So if you zoom in a bit, hopefully this is showing up okay. You can see the path of the river that was running. Everything you see in blue there is the current Gatineau River. And then what you see there in the darker color was the old Gatineau River. It's kind of a cool thing. And then from that, I was able to put a layer in here that shows where the old Gatineau River was. So I'm going to take that one off. And on top of that, what I did was layer on some township plans, just to give me an idea of where all the lots were in concessions. And this is from 1910. This was a series of Quebec provincial topographic maps that were done in 1910. And from those, I was able to plot on the roads. So those are the roads that were existing at Gatineau at the time. The blue road is actually the railway. And this road along here is the Martindale Road, so for context. So I only really just plotted in the roads that were near the river. I'm sure there were other roads around, but those were the main roads at the time that sort of got you in and out of the Gatineau River. So taking that off, and take the old river off, and this is where I added in the air photos. These are those 1927 air photos. And with that, once you have those into there, put some places in there, and we'll just do a little tour. Hopefully this will work. So there's the, like I said, 1927 these were taken, and the dam was just beginning to be built. And if you see, everything you see in blue there was where you see where the current Gatineau River is. So near the Opwàgan Dam, it was actually starting to flood at that point. And there's an area there called the Mountain Rapids over along here. And that's Barton Flats. That was where the Barton family were located. We're going to look at those a bit closer a bit later on. Unfortunately, there's some gaps in the air photographs that we don't have, but here's some photographs that we have of Boulanger Rapids. That was Plon Rapids at the time. And moving up a little further north is the Manitou Falls. Unfortunately, there's no air photographs for around the Manitou Falls, which would have been kind of neat at the time, because I think it was probably quite the site at the time. And then there was a whole series of rapids along here called Boulez Rapid. And then we get to what was called Irish Creek, this is where Ryansville was. And you see here the confluence of where the Gatineau River kind of meets the Gatineau River in Lac Ste. Marie. So that was just a bit of an overview to show what we're going to be looking at. So now we're going to go back a bit to the beginning. We'll take all of this stuff off, and Don's going to take over now, and he's going to talk a bit about some of the prehistory. There you go, Don.
Low Village in about 1920 had 1,300 people. It was a population on the census. And in the municipality, things hadn't changed much till now with the locations of the places, with the Manitou or Martindale, with Vanassa to the north, Fieldville, Brins Hill, and then Low Village. And I'm sorry about that. You can see there on the right-hand side, there's a road going down at Smith Road. It led to the Opwàgan, and Brooks's Hotel was a big hotel in Low at that time. And a little farther up were some of the other small houses, but there wasn't a whole lot of people living in the village at that time. They were spread out mostly in farms around the area. That's just a shot of Low Village long ago. Anyway, most of the occupations in the low area, that's Brooks's Irwin store, which is right at the Opwàgan Gates going down to the plant. It was there in the 1890s. That's actually Britain's Hill Hotel at 1908, 1911. And each little hamlet had their own store, general stores spotted around the municipality. Most of the work done in the area was farming and logging. And of course, there was a low station that's taken just at the turn of automobiles and horses, and you can see the cream cans on there. And there was a Vanassa station, which was built relatively around the same time in 1892, 1893. So those were the two main stations. So that's a little bit of picture of Low. The population was mostly of Irish descent, and there were pockets of French beginning to form in the municipality. And that shows a wonderful slide where they brought the logs down to the river. That's a picture of Eddie Flynn up the Manitou. A lot of people here would be able to recognize that name and the area. The Opwàgan Falls was quite the area for people coming to paint it, to take pictures for photography, to visit. There's a really neat picture of a native encampment we found in archives. The falls was very beautiful, but it was rough. And like I say, there was a lot of people visiting it. There was a lot of logging that took place coming down the river, and it's really interesting to see sometimes how they must have managed the timbers coming down the river. They have big log jams at the time, you can imagine, taking place at the Opwàgan. And that's a picture of the falls. My uncle gave me this picture. And it's really, you can tell the size of the falls. It's about 32 to 34 feet high. And you can't really understand the height of it until you see a person standing beside it. And that's in one of the next pictures I think that we have here, is you could see a log jam here with a guy standing on the logs. It was clogged up at the falls. I guess that was quite a log jam. And another one shows a total of about 8 men. You can see the long sticks there. They had long pike poles, and they were trying to release files. And here's another one where there's actually 8 guys standing in the log jams, and they'd have to move that. So you can imagine the work that had to be done to move that. It's quite dangerous work. But with the coming of the railroad in 1892, things changed a bit in the Low municipality, not only for business and for building, but also tourism really hit the area. And it became an area advertised for major hunting and fishing. And there were trains, a train would come up, coach cars would come up from Ottawa with as many as 200 people on it from many government agencies, and they would come to the Opwàgan around the falls to picnic and spend the day there and then go back down at night on the train. So there were many, many indications of newspaper reports of tourism in the Opwàgan area, as there was in many other areas, Pickenock and Bluesy, and they said a sportsman's paradise. Oh, that's a cottage, which is at the Grove. Yeah, it's built in 1898. It's an old cottage, and it was actually a bit of a hotel or a stopping place where they used to house people that came to visit. That's an old picture of some camping at the Grove. Looked like some kind of a garden party or something. You can see the different dresses and wares. Okay. And that's a picture of a lady sitting along the banks of the Poggan. Yep, having a picnic. So, for those of you that aren't aware of where the Grove is and where this album originated from, it's right immediately across from the Opwàgan Dam. And in there's, to the left of the screen, you can see there was the Smith Farms that are there. And all spotted along the riverfront there, you can see indications of little cottages or tents that are there. So that's where it is, right immediately across from the Opwàgan Falls. And you can see the towers on the island there. So this was taken just after the Opwàgan Dam would have opened. Campers actually made a map of the area, and they gave names to some of the places around there, and all the people, there was up to 16 families came and camped there from Ottawa, and they would stay there from late spring until fall. And there were some of the names on the camp, and they marked, really detailed, all of the pictures that were taken. The maps were very, very detailed. Every picture had a script involved with them, and what they would do, whether they were doing a washing or whether they were swimming or whatever. And it shows the major island, which is a highlight of the area near the Opwàgan Inn. They call it Plum Pudding Island. And the rapids there is where the falls come out, right between that island and above. So they came there and they stayed in tents, and they documented the names of the families that were there, and they brought their children up, and they would come up on the train, and a lot of times the men would go back to work and the women would stay behind, and they'd camp there throughout the whole summer. So the importance of these pictures, as we go along, Mark, you can move along with them, is not only the way of life in the camping, it's where they went here later. You can see, I think about 3 or 4 pictures later, where they went and they got into the falls. I think it must have been in the summer, because there was no way they could have got in there any other time. They got right into the gorge, which was a rock which was at the base of the falls. And they would do all kinds of excursions, and at the same time they would take pictures, and they'd give a detailed description of what was going on in those in the falls. I think if you jump ahead. Okay. So there was a major sandbar would come out in the summertime, so they were swimming and all kinds of events there. They actually give us the names of every one of those children and every one of the adults, and documented it on paragraphs. They had races. You can see that the pole's stuck in the water, and they had races down through there. Now, here's some interesting pictures. They get right into where the falls was. That's the log jams that were there. And they're pretty daring, not only to be there, but take the pictures. And they get right up against the rock faces. And we don't have too many pictures of that area. These were the only ones that I've ever found with close-ups that close. You can see how rough the falls was. There's an interesting picture. There was a distinctive white face. It was called the gorge at the bottom of the falls, and that's where the water really dropped down. And they tried to take panoramic shots. So they would take pictures and they paste them together to show the full extent of the Opwàgan. and the sandbars that were there. And there's the written descriptions on them. That's Irwin's store. If anybody here grew up in Lowell, knew where Bill Irwin's store was, and that's him on the right in that dark jacket. And Irwin's store was just like he was a brother of Irwin and 𝐸𝐻𝑡. Jimmy Irwin, he was a brother. They had a big store, and they were a major place to buy your things at that time. And one of the other things that was interesting about the pictures, people from the Grove, was one of the photographers called 𝐸𝑣𝑒𝑒𝑑 Bell. He worked as a teenager at the dam, and he took these unbelievable pictures from on high. He got up on the top of these cranes, and you can see the height that he was there, and he took a whole series of pictures of the construction of the dam, and you can see how high he would be. And each picture he gave a complete description of what was going on and where. So it was really something to find, like a series of about 20 pictures like that. And you can see the writing at the bottom. He would tell, taken from the top tower, 230 feet looking across Byfield Bay. His name was 𝐸𝑣𝑒𝑒𝑑 Bell. So he was one of the people who was at the Grove. And Mark and I are starting to wonder who really took the pictures of the river. It could have been somebody like him. We don't know if it was somebody commissioned by Hydro, or was it somebody daring enough to be able to go up there and document and take all those pictures. And we have one last picture of Charles Cook. Yeah. Now, Joan Bruce Nagogi was here. That's her grandfather. He was a participant camper at the Grove, and he was a famous Mohawk orator and writer. And he was writing a dictionary of the Mohawk language. And he frequented there because he was married in with that family there. And he built a couple of lodges. In fact, one of the lodges that's still there has two totem poles in the cottage that he built and designed that are in there. That was Charles Cook. So, I think that should about do me for that. Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. One of the things Don and I have been sort of puzzling through is trying to figure out who these people were that at the Grove. I checked one of the Ottawa city directories for a lot of these names, and it turns out a lot of these folks all kind of worked for printing companies and were photographers and that kind of thing. And some of them actually worked for the Hull Electric Company as well too. So we're trying to sort out if they were up there taking photographs, and that's why they were camping, and they were kind of professional photographers and that kind of thing as well. But I mean, that's going to take a fair amount more research to figure out what was actually going on there and why they were actually coming up. And like I say, there's definitely some more work to be done there. Okay, so thanks for that, Don. So I'm going to take it from here and talk a bit more about the second album, the one that relates more to the development of the dam construction. And these are that's this guy. And these are the photographs that we think were taken by Howarth, who was one of the campers at the Grove. And these are probably more considered sort of engineering type records, hydrology. They were actually documenting a lot of the physical and hydrological aspects of the Gatineau. But we'll start here with here. Here's a picture from that album of two guys here, 𝐸𝐯𝐞𝐫 and Freeman Cross. We'll start a bit with 𝐸𝐯𝐞𝐫. I'll get my notes here. So George 𝐸𝐯𝐞𝐫, at this time in 1917, he was the superintendent of the Hull Electric Company. He was born in Quebec City, but he moved to Hull about 1905, first as an engineer at Ross and Hallgate, and then he became superintendent of the Hull Electric Company from 1906 to 1926. Eventually he became the president of the Gatineau Power Company in 1934, and then the president of 𝐸𝑣𝑒𝑒𝑑𝑦 in 1940. So he was a big player at the time. The Hull Electric Company itself was incorporated in January 1895. In 1896, it built a power plant on the Deschênes Rapids, which provided electricity mainly for streetcars around Hull. This was the era when streetcars were taken off. It was one of the major drivers, I think, for getting people around and for the development of cities. So in 1923, the Hull Electric Company was given permission to develop the Opwàgan Falls. However, in 1931, Canadian Pacific sold its interests in the Hull Electric Company to the Gatineau Power Company, which was then a subsidiary of the Canadian International Paper Company, the CIP. So the power potential for the Opwàgan's natural hydraulic head caught the eye of G. Gordon Gale, of course, and he was serving there as early as 1916. And here are some of the images I think we see from 1917 of some of the earliest surveys that they did. This is one of our favorite pictures here, Don and I. The falls, looking, these are the captions actually right from what you see below the captions from the albums themselves. So these are the Opwàgan Falls looking directly downstream from an eminence in 1917. An eminence, I believe, was a little mountain beside it. It's one of the very unique views. Here's another photograph looking upstream at the proposed intake works. And you see little buddy here, Gordon Gale, I believe, at the bottom of the picture. This is a picture taken from below the dams, around from where the Grove is too, and there's a person here as well. And looking upstream, a channel between westerly mainland and an island. So that would have been the Plum Pudding Island that you saw earlier on. What's really interesting about these, a lot of these photographs are actually annotated. So that's looking up from the Opwàgan Dam, and on this photograph they're showing you basically the approximate crest of the dam and how high they expected the water was going to go. Quite interesting. So by 1922, as I mentioned, there was a big push to get this dam done. So the project, actually, to do this was one of the most ambitious engineering feats ever undertaken in the Ottawa-Hull area. The cost estimate at the time was $16 million, with 3 years to complete. They actually did it in 3 years, which is pretty amazing. At the peak of the project in the late 1920s, the population of Low municipality temporarily ballooned from 1,300 people to between 5,000 and 6,000 people. The vast majority being construction laborers. And I understand from what I've read too that most of them came from New York. They were bricklayers from New York for the most part. To meet the needs of the industry between 1925 and 1928, the Farmers Rapids, Chelsea, the Opwàgan Dams were built, raising 45,000 kilowatts. And of course, reservoirs intended to control the flow of the Gatineau River were also developed at the Bosqueton Lake in 1928 and the Kobanga Lake in 1929. So I'm just going to show you a series of some of the photographs here that shows that the remarkable transformation of the Opwàgan Dam. These are photographs from the albums too. Basically looking what it's currently in its pristine kind of view. This is from Don's book, actually. These are some of the early construction pictures getting going. It's the building of the coffer dams, which were the first to be built. So soon, something like this became something like that, and then eventually this. That was the first coffer dams that they built. To support all of this, of course, they built a series of bunkhouses and a tramway going into Lowe's Village. This again are pictures from Don's book. And here's the other end of that tram being built, which I think is kind of a fun picture. Quite the engineering feats going on here. Eventually, this is about midway through construction. This is what the dams are starting to look like. They're starting to take shape. That was 𝐸𝑣𝑒𝑒𝑒𝑚. Eventually, it would come to look something like this. And that's again from 1927. That was an oblique aerial photograph that was taken around, I think it was actually a bit later. It was actually more after it was finished. Yep.
This is Irwin's store. That would have been the feature site of Fountain Inn. And this was a large area where they brought the crushed stone out to make cement. These were all bunkhouses and foreman shops all along here. Houses all along here up in this area. And this is where the railroad side came in. Came right into the power of those states in that area.
No, one of the things we've always heard about was that Opwàgan Dam was actually built to supply Toronto, streetcars in Toronto. All of the power went to Toronto, and we were kind of wondering about that, and then I found this very obscure map from a 1931 Hydro Ontario publication. It's not a great map altogether, but it does definitely show the transmission line coming from Opwàgan all the way down to Toronto, to a place called Leaside, which Leaside was apparently the biggest substation in the world at the time. I find it remarkable that being near Niagara Falls, that they needed more electricity, but somehow they needed to tap into the Opwàgan to make, again, it was all streetcars. Streetcars were blowing in the cities at the time in the 1920s. Okay, so we'll go back to this photograph that I showed you, G. Gordon Gale, and this is our friend Freeman Cross, who is a character all on its own, and I think we could do a whole presentation on him. At this time, Freeman Cross was, at this time in the picture, he was 38 years old. But Freeman Cross was actually from Farm Point. And there's actually a picture here. This is from an earlier talk of Freeman Cross's little powerhouse in his sawmill. And Freeman Cross House 2, he had a little round house called the 𝐸𝐴𝐼. And this was actually his little residence here. Here's a nice picture of Cross's mill. The Cross Mill in Farm Point. Now this little building was the Freeman Cross powerhouse. Now this little building was worth $1.2 million because at the time Freeman Cross, a little later, he actually sued the Gatineau Power Company for having flooded out his little power station, and he won. He won a settlement for $1.2 million, which back then was just crazy amounts of money. Because there was a statute on Quebec regulations at the time that prevented larger hydroelectric companies from drowning out smaller ones. But of course, Gatineau Power Company started appealing, and they appealed all the way up to eventually to London, to Privy Council or some court up in London, and eventually Freeman Cross got nothing. Got nothing at all. But I suspect I did see in the some of the Hydro-Quebec files too, that I think he negotiated, he got a lot of free land. So Cross himself, he ended up with 7 lumber mills up and down the Gatineau River. And he was quite prosperous, and though I think he did have a few bankruptcies here and there, and he was a bit everywhere. And he was also a bit of a showman, it sounds like, because he had a place also, a lumber mill up in 𝐸𝐻𝑒𝑚, which is a little bit north of. And this place is where he was, an operation where he was breeding cows and moose together. Here's a picture of Angus of 𝐸𝐻𝑒𝑚, was born 8 days ago. A bull moose, and his mother was a crossbred cow and moose. So we actually have a whole bunch of pictures of this, and it was apparently, don't think it was true, but I think it was a bit more of a tourist attraction. So he was getting people up there, and there was a little hotel up in 𝐸𝐻𝑒𝑚 at the time too. So anyway, again, quite the character. But getting back to his original role back in 1917, this is from the files actually. Explains a bit. Oops, sorry. Sorry, let me start that over. Come on, you. This is a bit of from one of the memos that I read that kind of explained what Cross's role was in all of this. Stated in the presence of Mr. Gale, Mr. Brown, that he was prepared to deliver all necessary lands and rights to develop hydroelectric power for a capital cost of $10 per electrical horsepower capacity. So it was all based on how much horsepower he could provide, based on 10,000. He stated he thought he could deliver at this price and the properties to the development of the head totaling blah, 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 blah. So he was sort of a land agent. So I don't think the whole electric company really wanted to go out and buy all of this stuff themselves. So he was sort of an intermediary, I think, who was actually up there as early as 1917 buying up properties. They knew it was coming. So I think a lot of the farmers are ready to start selling and start thinking about everywhere else. So for the purposes of settling, the Opwàgan properties are divided into 4 classes. Properties owned by the Crown, properties owned by the vendor, properties under option to vendor, of which titles are clear, properties under option to vendor, of which titles are not clear, or which have to be expropriated. So those were the 4 classes of properties that we're looking at. And this is a bit of a summary found on the file too of what was actually settled on in the end. We hear a lot about expropriation, but it turns out it was only 4 properties that were expropriated. And there are here, there's a couple in Hinks. I think they're remaining around Lac Ste. Marie, and a few around the falls themselves. However, the government owns 24 lots, which to me means that those were the squatters. Those were 24 lots where people were living there who didn't have clear title. So I think there were some accommodations. It's hard to sell. I have to take a deeper dive into the files to find out what actually happened to a lot of those people. But you can see here, this was some of the notes explaining some of the situations. Nothing was shown to title, no patent issued to the Crown, no issued from the Crown. So these were basic squatters. I think there was about 20-some people here that were basically either compensated somehow or maybe moved, but they did not have title to their property. So in the end, this is a bit of a list of some of the people that actually got paid and how much they were paid. You see the Bartons and Hugh Wilson, $3,000 to $4,000. Joshua Ruthenstrom was a big landholder, received about $6,000. Just show you some of the names here. Some Ryans. For the person who got the most were the McLarens. McLarens ended up being paid $40,000 for their properties because I think at the time, from what I've been able to understand, is that McLarens actually owned all the property around Opwàgan and what was Mountain Rapids at the time. I think they probably wanted to get in there and build a dam at one time. Because at that point, they already had a dam in Buckingham, so I get a feeling maybe they were speculating to build one at Opwàgan as well, but for some reason or another, they sold out first to Cross and then to the Hull Electric Company. And you also see here a little cost here, the Roman Catholic Church, $150 were compensated. And I think that was in Lac Ste. Marie. I'll show you later where they had to move to church for in Lac Ste. Marie. Here's a map here that shows you all the properties that were affected along the Gatineau. So everything that you see outlined here, those are all the properties along the river that ended up being purchased by the Hull Electric Company, either by Cross or directly by the Hull Electric Company. So at this point, I'm going to turn back on the air photos and the roads. And I'm just going to show you a few photographs from moving up the Gatineau River, some of the main highlights. And this is Mount Rapids, which was just above Ipawgan Falls, and actually it was sort of part of the package. Initially, want to develop hydroelectricity, they want to have two dams. One would have been at Ipawgan, the other one would have been at Mountain Rapids. But from what Don tells me, that the soils around the Mountain Rapids were unstable, and they weren't able to actually build a dam there. So I think those plans were all finally given up. But just to give you an idea of what those rapids look like, this is a picture of, these are from the Howarth albums. This is looking up Mountain Rapids, and that's our buddy Gordon Gale there in 1917. And here's a bit of a more of a close-up view.
Can you move back from the mic and speak up? We can't hear you. We don't know what you're saying.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're too close to the mic.
How's that better?
Even more. No, the other way. Get it so pointed so you speak.
How's that? Is that better?
Bend it down.
How's that? Is that better?
And then lower your, brace it up a bit.
How's that? Does that sound better? Sorry about that, folks. Maybe if I just hold it a bit, it'll be better. How's that? Does that sound better? How about that? How's that? Does that sound better right off the top? Okay, thanks. So here's, like I say, here's another picture, a close-up view of looking up Mountain Rapids. Show you again, as we were talking about earlier, the challenges that people must have had to get by a lot of these rapids. And here's another panorama, 4-piece panorama of Mount Rapids looking upstream. And this is one actually that the Historical Society paid for at the McGill to actually get a better resolution on this one. And again, there's the Mount Rapids coming around the corner. And then this nice old farm on the corner here. And we think that was called the Bouchard farm at the time. And that's a family that's still around here now. Here's another picture of lower end of Mount Rapids looking downstream, showing low-lying farm across the river. You can see that over here, all very low-lying. And that was what was called Rosenstrom's Flats. And of course that was all flooded in. Here, let me put this back in here. And we have this really great picture here too, again from the albums, of what that flat looked like at the time. Rosenstrom's Flat looking west from Vanas's house. Row from low is in gap on the right. The gap behind straw stacks separates two islands to be formed by the flooding. Foundation of Rosenstrom's barn on lower connect on the lower left, and that would have been the Rosenstrom's barn here. And here's actually a picture of those two islands, I think, that are still there out in the middle of Ipawgan Bay there. It says that it was Vanas. It was taken from Vanas's house, and if you look into the files here, this is a bit of an example of the type of situation that was happening. By this time, Rosenstrom had already left. He had moved up to Aylwin, and he ended up running a hotel up there. But at the same time, he rented out his property to this fellow here, Vanas. So here's a bit of a memo explaining that situation. All right, so we'll move up a bit over to what we call Barton Flats. So the Bartons, of course, were a very prominent local family. George Barton came to Canada actually from Scotland and originally settled down around Hawkesbury. In about 1868, George Barton moved up to Wakefield Township and bought a farm along to Gatineau, where eventually he sold to William Fairbairn. Eventually then he moved up to Low at this property here and purchased 680 acres. A farm building, a huge double house from the Hamilton and Low Company. So I get a feeling this is where the original Hamilton and Low Lumber Company was, probably on this lot, which kind of made sense. And of course, they eventually the Bartons had their own lumber mill, and they farmed on both sides of the river, and also built a school along there, and all sorts of other community resources. To give you a bit of an idea of what they looked like from the river. This is looking downstream from Wilson's Ferry, on our right, Barton's Flat, far right center. So that's where we're looking at here. From the files here, you can get a bit of an idea of what each of them got. There were 4 brothers eventually who were paid for their properties here. John, James, Archie, and William. And there's Ruth and Strom as well. So just to give you an idea of the type of compensation that these folks got. Based on that, this shows you a bit of an idea of what that property all would have looked like. So they owned very, very extensive tracts of land. And here's a picture of the Barton family. Eventually, all the Barton family, at least 4 of the brothers, moved down to Kealey. And in the Historical Society, we actually have a whole bunch of pictures of the Bartons from Kealey. And here are some of the brothers and their wives. I think there were 9 brothers and 1 sister, so I'm figuring this must have been some of the in-laws as well. Wilson's Ferry. I showed you a picture earlier of Wilson's Ferry. If you see here, there's a little red road here that goes along here too, and a road that goes across the river. A lot of that road, of course, now is flooded. But we think, we know that there was a ferry, a Wilson's Ferry, down below the Opwàgan, which would have been right around here too. But we figured there must have been a ferry up there as well, because this is a picture again of that same picture looking downriver. But if you flip it around, this is looking upstream from Wilson's Ferry, and the Wilson's farm was on the right. So they actually had their farm. They were big landowners too. They owned about 600 acres. Hugh Wilson, his name was mainly, and he was mainly on the Delta home side of things. So we'll move up a bit further upriver to what was called Belanger Rapids at the time. And we have this actually nice picture here. This is looking upstream from bottom of Belanger Rapids. And again, this is a bit later in 1925. A lot of these albums have pictures going from 1917 to about 1925, 1926, to just before when they were making final preparations to start flooding out the land. A little further up too, I don't show you on the map here, but the Francis map indicates that there was a ferry here at this point as well, which kind of makes sense because this is just opposite of where the Ramsey farm was. And I should note here too that you can actually see some of the buildings still existent here back in 1927. They hadn't been removed yet. And of course, this is the house that I know that Brian Doyle writes about of having floated down the river, and that's the Thomas Ramsey house. So the story behind that, the Thomas Ramsey Sr. house, the house that floated down the Gatineau River in 1929. So I guess in the early 1920s, Thomas, then in his mid-80s, suffered a stroke, which affected his judgment and his memory. So when the agent came to have him sign off, he signed off happily, and didn't really know what he was signing, but he signed anyway. So the younger family members were absent, and they decided they were going to take it to court. And at the time, the lawyers told them, well, until this is settled, don't move anything. Don't start taking anything down. Unfortunately, that took too long, and of course, the river started flooding, and the house ended up floating down the river. And I suspect there was a lot of that going on, too. There were probably other buildings happening at the same time. There's a picture of the Ramsey family outside the house. I guess that's Thomas Ramsey there himself. And there's a picture of Thomas Ramsey and his daughters, all wearing matching clothes for some reason. Not sure what that was about. Eventually, the Ramseys moved down to Chelsea, Ramsey Point, Ramsey Road, right outside of Cascade. And here's a picture of their homestead off Ramsey Road. That was a brick house that was apparently built from the brick of the Peerless Hotel that was in Cascade at the time, and which itself was flooded out as part of the flooding of the Chelsea Dam. All right, so we're going to go up a little bit further up. We get to an area here called the Manitou Rapids. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of photographs of the Manitou Rapids, or falls, I guess, not the rapids, the falls, because apparently we're a sight to be seen. We only have this one picture of the falls, the Manitou Falls. This is the upper part of the Manitou Falls, and it doesn't really look like much of a falls, but it does say here it's about 12 or 13 feet high, and that was in October 1917. So, like I said, I think the water levels on the Gatineau must have fluctuated like crazy at the time, because there was absolutely nothing controlling it. Going up a little further up, we get into the Boulez Rapids, and we actually have this really nice, in the photograph, there's this really nice panorama of this spot as well. Panoramic view of gauge at head of Boulez Rapids, looking upstream at corner, downstream at left. No sharp bend on the narrow river. That's in 1917. It says here that there's a gauge. Can't actually see it here, but it's not a great picture. But if you look at the photo albums, it does show you. Kind of faint, but you can see the guy here painting the actual gauges onto the side of the rocks. So at some point they were starting to measure about how much things were going to be flooded. Then we get up to this part, which is kind of where the Lac Ste-Marie meets the Gatineau, and this was an area that was once called Ryansville. And I know there's some Ryans in attendance here tonight, so they could probably tell you more about this than I know. But Ryansville was a real going concern at one time. There was a whole bunch of families there. It had its own post office, its own store, and it was sort of connected to Lac Ste-Marie by road. Unfortunately, I think with the flooding, Ryansville kind of died out. Now it's kind of near where the Lac Ste-Marie golf course is. But there's actually a few little really quite interesting photographs of the bridge that used to lead to Ryansville. The red bridge looking south, old house on right. It says here, note the stones to anchor bridge floor during high water. And you can actually see the stones here. And in fact, a bit of a close-up of them here too. And they were again, at this point in time, they were starting to upper part of gauge on inside of bridge. So they were starting to measure. And actually we have one from under the bridge. Kind of shows you, looking downstream, of them preparing for the gauges. Now, if they say this bridge used to float away, this is how much water used to come flying through here probably in the spring. So just again to show you how we talk now about water levels on the Gatineau, not knowing what's happening, and I could just imagine back then when there was just completely unregulated the amount of water that used to come flying through here. And then we'll just move up quick, just a couple quick pictures showing you the 𝐸𝐻𝐵 brig. I have no air photos or anything to show this, but these are from the album. 𝐸𝐻𝐵 bridge from upstream in 1917. again, seemed like it was all crib work at the time. And a picture from the 𝐬𝐈 Bridge looking upstream. And just upstream there was foot of St. Mary's Rapids. Now we would say St. Marie, of course, Lac St. Marie, Mont St. Marie, but back then they were referred to as St. Mary's. And this is actually another picture from, oops, where is it? Oh, this is actually from Don's collection showing the 𝐬𝐈 Bridge with some of the crib work that was built to get there, and another picture here too of the 𝐬𝐈 Bridge, which apparently was raised 17 feet to allow for the over the Gatineau River. And finally, we'll take a quick look at Lac St. Marie. Again, there's a whole section in the files of Lac St. Marie that didn't copy everything because, of course, it was probably the village that was the most affected by the flooding, and there were some big concerns there at the time. Not the least of which was the fact that there was a church and a cemetery there. This is a picture of where the church is now in Lac St. Marie, and if you know Lac St. Marie, this is where it's kind of built up over here. But this is where the village would have been at the time, right out in the middle of the lake. And I actually grabbed these off the Lac St. Marie website, municipal website, a few pictures of them moving the church uphill, which must have been a big endeavor. And another view, moving them up the hill. And you can actually see a bit in the background how far up the hill they had to move it. So just one little last thing I wanted to show here too, there's this little picture we have here over at this sort of north end of Lac St. Marie. Again, this is all flooded back now too. This is a picture of what they called 𝐸𝑣𝑒𝑒𝑒 Bridge, which is, at the time, I believe, was pretty much where this place was, 𝐸𝑣𝑒𝑒's General Store in Lac St. Marie. And this was one of the places that was expropriated. Not too sure why. Again, I think a lot of people in Lac St. Marie were sort of digging their heels in and really didn't want to move and wanted to be compensated more than they really needed to be. And just to say, this is probably an aspect that I would like to find out more about. Again, we have a cottage right up here, not too far, so I'm in Lac St. Marie a lot, and hopefully that's something I'll be able to explore a bit more later. So that's pretty much ends our tour up the Gatineau River. I don't know if anybody had any more questions or if there's anything more that you want to add, Don?
I'd like to just restate what Mark said. If anybody has any pictures or information, pre-dam pictures, or even just of Low municipality, there's a sheet on the table back there that you could fill out, and it would be nice to continue to get as much information as we can, and possibly post all these on the Gatineau Valley Historical website for us to maintain. Also, as Mark mentioned, we found that album down in Montreal, and it was in a cabinet and almost in a basement-like setting in a folder, and we're really concerned that it might disappear. And we're going to try to some way either get a grant or get somebody to come forward with some funds that we can get them properly photographed and preserved, because they're real treasures. There's no others, I don't think, like them. We've looked in around the hydro files and everything, and this might have been commissioned by the hydro. We're not sure where they really come from. We're not sure the photographer, and it's still a mystery, so we're going to be working on it. So.
So did anybody have any final questions? Oh. At the construction, I presume it was for was some kind of crane for moving around a lot. I mean, the amount of concrete they probably had to move. Imagine it was for doing a lot of that. I mean, apparently it was all. I mean, they just brought so many bricklayers from apparently Italian bricklayers from New York City to do all of this. So they would have been in charge of doing a lot of the work.
Can you imagine the tower that said it's 234 feet high? So
Yeah.
that was quite high for somebody to be up on and move around.
Oh, over here, and I'll get you after.
Have you heard what they used to move the church in Lac Ste. Marie?
Well, from what I can tell from the picture, it was horses. They just rolled it along, probably on logs somehow or another. That's all I can see. I mean, I don't think they had any big trucks or anything to be able to do that kind of thing. So it would have all been done, traditionally rolling along logs or that kind of thing. And it was done in the summer, so it wasn't done in the winter. And now, of course, it's a big brick building. So the brick was added later. So it was a wood frame church at the time. So it would have been a slightly lighter, I would think. I mean, the brick, I think, came later on.
Thank you.
Over there was someone back there?
Yeah. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
I got tons of questions, but I think I'll just leave you with one, and not for you actually, because the most important question I had tonight, I think, was for Gilbert Whiteduck. And he mentioned the original name of Opwàgan Falls was Opwàgan. And he had a story, and I wondered if he was comfortable sharing it with us. If not, that's fine. But if he was comfortable, I think it's really important for us to know the original names of these places in the history, and to have that oral tradition carried forward. So if you're comfortable, could you share something about that with us?
Really, there's a lot behind it. I would really like
No, we don't.
that as a future speaker, so that we can all come back. Never hear about it. Those things were really important for us because the name didn't only mean things; it had lots of context. It's not about saying this is a chair that has so many other meanings. And many parts of the Gatineau River, there were particular areas very, very important. And this was one of many. And we know from what's been passed down to us what families were, this was their clan territory. And that's why, if I may, I just want to pick up on a question I had, whether or not you ran across, were there any Asian, indigenous, or black people at photos that you saw that would have worked on the dam?
There were, I guess you could call from memory, talking to my elder uncle. And he said a large number of people came from Sweden, Norway, in and around those areas. So a lot came over from them. As Mark said, there was a lot came from New York too. But I didn't hear of any names as far as Asian.
I mean, we do. I mean, luckily, funnily enough, we have like hundreds of pictures of construction. I think if we start zooming in on pictures, we might be able to tell a bit more. But there's nothing recorded as far as who the employees were or anything like that. I guess the engineering companies at the time would have been looking after that. It wasn't really the Gatineau Power Company. But you're right. I mean, just to pick up on what you said too in your question as well is, Don and I were doing this tonight because we've discovered all this great information and we're all trying to put it back into context and add layers of stories and family history and you say indigenous history all at the same time. So this is just really a beginning for us. We wanted to just try it out, put all the information out there, and certainly, like Don says, if you know more that we should know about, then please let us know. And we'd love to see your pictures and sort of keep adding to this story and keep building on it. It's really the way to go, and it's really, it's really something that we're glad to see that we're such a great crowd tonight. There's that much interest in this. So hopefully we'll hear more about this story. So we have time for a couple more questions? Oh,
Yeah.
Got one here.
Do you know where the names of the rapids are coming from? Like Mountain Rapid, Boulanger Rapid?
It was just local usage, I would think, at the time, whoever was there first and what people thought. I mean, it's funny that a lot of them are French, which is kind of...
No, but that's back in names. Those names are back in 1850. They were there in
Must have been.
Yeah, and I wonder if you were able to find out where those names are coming from, because there is so
No.
many rapids.
No, I suppose if you start digging back into the census, you might be able to see who were some of the owners around there. But yeah, what I found quite interesting is that most of the names are French, whereas there wasn't a lot of French population, you know, around Lowe, not that I could see. So, Plum, Blanchet, and Bolo. Yeah, interesting. It's something that we'll find out more, hopefully. You try and find out, let us know. One last question over there in the blue.
I'm curious about the timeline of flooding. Like, when the dam was built, did these places flood over the course of like weeks or months or years?
It took about 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, I think it started pretty much immediately, right around the construction. But someone was just telling me tonight too, over at Ryansville, that you know, it was a year or two later, and people were hesitating to leave, and they didn't actually leave their houses until the water was right up to their footsteps, and that might have been about 2 years later. So it took about 2 years altogether for it to be flooded. It took about 2 years for the construction as well, right? So I think there was a lot of up and down at the time too, because they would have had to control the water during the construction.
There's one thing I'd like to do is, sometime, I have a lot of photos and albums, and they're like old albums, and we're going to try to improve upon them if we can possibly get them done. But it would be nice for people to be able to get a close-up look of them, because it's very difficult to show the justice with the pictures that they really look like in some of the albums back there. It shows how rough the river was, and we can get a sense from a screen and everything like that, but it's really nice sometimes to be able to have people look through the albums and take a look. So maybe in the future we'd have something where we could have an afternoon where you could do that and take a look at them.
Yeah, get a closer look.
Close-up look at them.
Any last questions? Oh, sorry. Tim, just a second. Well, in the northern watersheds, like I said, the Kabanga, Lac Kabanga, the Basketong Reservoir now. So I guess it was the headwaters of the Gatineau at the time, and they're still there. I mean, they're still using those big reservoirs to control flow all the way up and down the Gatineau. So yeah, there was a lot of water there. Tim?
It wasn't so much a question, it was more just to say thank you for all the work you've put into putting them together. That's amazing, all your overlaying the photos and all the layers you've done.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. Bye. I'm a bit of a geography nerd, so just kind of historical geography. I'm one of the few historical geographers in the area, so this is something I just do for fun. So I don't know unless Don had anything more you wanted to say, and thank you to Gilbert, and Dylan just wanted to say one quick last word.
Thanks, Mark. We have some youth here this evening, and we'd like to offer them a free 2-year membership to the Historical Society, and they will also obtain a copy of the 50th anniversary book about the Gatineau. So we'd ask that you please go to the desk and leave your name. If I know there's a younger girl here, you can leave your parents' email address or contact information so that we can keep in touch with you and make sure you get your book. Thanks.
Okay, so good night, folks. Safe drive home. And if anybody could help us, maybe skip back again, we need to put chairs away after. So we'll get that. The more people we go.